What if Jim Morrison did not really die at the age of 27 on July 3rd, 1971? What if? Perhaps upon his real death at the age of 82, a bust that was removed from the grave of Jim Morrison has been returned. Jim Morrison was born in 1943 in Melbourne, Florida. Jim Morrison's father, George Stephen Morrison, was a rear admiral in the U.S. Navy. He was a decorated officer and had a significant command of naval forces during the Vietnam War. Specifically, he was in charge of U.S. naval forces in the Gulf of Tonkin during the Gulf of Tonkin incident in 1964. Jim Morrison was arrested in New Haven, Connecticut. Some accounts put the arrest in Miami, Florida, but his mugshot clearly states New Haven, Connecticut. And most sources say New Haven, Connecticut. The arrest occurred on stage during a concert in December 9th, 1967, and he was charged with inciting a riot, resisting arrest, and public obscenity. The indecent exposure charge could not have been proven, which is what started the situation. After his death, he was pardoned. Morrison moved to Paris in 1971 after being convicted in the United States of indecent exposure. Sentenced to 6 months in jail, he lived in the French capital while appealing the verdict. He supposedly died at the age of 27 on July 3rd, 1971, becoming part of the 27 Club, beginning with the deaths of several 27-year-old popular musicians between 1969 and 1971, such as Brian Jones, Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, and Jim Morrison, all dying at the age of 27. 27 came to be and remains a permanent subject of popular culture, celebrity journalism, and entertainment industry lore. This perceived phenomenon, which came to be known as the 27 Club, attributes special significance to popular musicians, artists, actors, and other celebrities who have died at the age of 27, often as a result of drug and alcohol abuse or violence means such as homicide, suicide, or transportation-related accidents. Note that James Dean died at the age of 24, not 27. Jim Morrison's death became the subject of speculation because news of his death was released only after his funeral, and only 5 people attended his funeral. Also, there was no autopsy. Although the official cause of death was heart failure due to a drug overdose, there was no autopsy to prove that. Also, he had earlier talked to the Doors organist Ray Manzarek, once suggesting another possibility. Recalling a 1970 conversation with Morrison, the organist wondered if the intense frontman had just faked his death to start a new life and leave his troubles behind. That's a pleasant thought, actually. The official story of Jim Morrison's death was that he was found dead in the apartment bathtub by his partner, Pamela Corrison. Later, she would tell different stories. One story was that he died in the toilet at a nightclub. In a 2007 book, rock writer Sam Burnett asserted that Morrison in fact died in the toilet of a Paris nightclub, the Rock and Roll Circus, apparently from an overdose. Burnett, who managed the venue, where singer Marianne Faithfull and Roman Polanski, yeah, that Roman Polanski, were regulars, said a couple of drug dealers dragged the body into a taxi and returned it to the apartment. Another biographer believes that Morrison overdosed at the club but survived a few nights before his actual death. Because of Jim Morrison's father being military, there is also speculation that the CIA killed Jim Morrison to keep him quiet about something that his father had shared with him. Did his unusual arrest suggest that someone, maybe the CIA, maybe someone else, was putting the squeeze on Jim Morrison? It should be noted that there was a major payola scandal happening in the music industry around the time that Jim Morrison was forced to flee to France, only to later turn up dead. Did organized crime have something to do with Jim Morrison's death? The payola scandal included not only just money, but sex. But let us go back to the idea that Jim Morrison did not really die in 1971, but was put into a special program after giving secret testimony. He would be around 81 if he were still alive. Now let's go to the story of the long-lost bust that was stolen from Jim Morrison's grave some 37 years ago. It was stolen from his grave some 7 years after it had been placed there. 17 years after he supposedly died. Yes, the official story is that the bust was found during a different investigation. They weren't investigating the theft of the bust, but they were investigating money laundering or some such when the bust was found. But just imagine that if Jim Morrison were still alive, and it was he who had removed the bust from the grave on the 17th anniversary of his fake death, but truly the end of his life as he had known it. But now around the age of 82, he died for real, and his wife, or maybe his son, discovered his true identity upon his death, and discovered the bust with the revelation. Imagine the portrait of the bust being returned to his grave upon his real death as his new family discovered who he really was. And maybe the police caught them placing the bust on the grave and came up with a story about, the money laundering. If I were writing the end of his life, I think I much preferred that ending to the story than the story of him dying in the toilet of a nightclub or dying in his own bathtub at the young age of 27. Maybe that's just fantasy, imagination, and the real story is much more gruesome. But it would be nice to know, to think, to believe that he actually did have a happy life and a fairy tale ending. Much thanks for listening. I do appreciate it.